Hello, welcome to Lobby Stories. Chapter 1, The Night Before the Wedding. The night before the wedding was supposed to be filled with excitement and anticipation, but instead, I found myself spiraling into a vortex of uncertainty. My fiancée, Tina, had always been a mystery to me in some ways, but what I uncovered that evening was more than I could ever have anticipated. The discovery came abruptly. While scrolling through Facebook, I stumbled upon a private post Tina had made 4 years ago. It was a friends-only post, which in itself was strange because Tina wasn't the type to share much on social media. The message read, "If you change your mind, the groom can be swapped out at any time." The date of the post matched the day we announced our relationship. My heart pounded as I saw that the post had been liked by Rocky, her male classmate and close friend from high school. The revelation felt like a betrayal. Was this a joke between old friends? Or did it suggest something deeper, something I had failed to see for years? My mind raced with questions and fears, and I knew I had to confront Tina about this unsettling discovery. I found her at a singles party, a pre-wedding tradition she'd insisted on attending. The venue was lively, but I felt a crushing weight in my chest as I approached her. The moment Tina noticed me, her face shifted from surprise to irritation. "You're being unreasonable," she snapped, her frustration palpable. "You're always fixating on the past. No wonder no one loves you." Her words stung, but I couldn't let her dismissal distract me. For years into our relationship, we had built a stable life together. We talked about marriage, and now, on the eve of our wedding, instead of excitement, I was engulfed by a sense of dread. Earlier that evening, Tina had received a phone call. I overheard Rocky's voice on the other end, suggesting they go to their usual place and get drunk. When I asked her where she was going, Tina brushed me off, saying she was meeting old classmates. Her tone was final, her eyes dismissive. I clenched my fists, trying to suppress the growing unease. Tina had seemed increasingly distant lately, possibly due to work stress and the pressures of the upcoming wedding. I convinced myself that a night out with old friends might help her unwind. Yet, her abrupt departure left me uneasy. After she left, I noticed her phone lying on the coffee table, abandoned in her hurry. My mind was a storm of suspicion and doubt. Tina had always been secretive about her phone, frequently deleting chat histories and rarely posting online. But tonight, my curiosity got the better of me. I picked up her phone, my hands shaking as I scrolled through her messages. It didn't take long to find the post that had shaken my world. The first post was a joyous announcement of our relationship, but the second post was a chilling revelation: "If you change your mind, the groom can be swapped out at any time." It was visible only to Rocky, who had liked it. As I stared at the screen, Rocky, the friend I thought I knew, seemed like a stranger. The doubt that had been a faint whisper in the back of my mind had now blossomed into an overwhelming presence. Was it merely a joke between old friends, or did Tina have deeper reservations about our relationship? Was Rocky more than just a friend to her? The night before what was meant to be the happiest day of my life had turned into a nightmare. Everything I thought I knew about Tina and our relationship was now in question. As I sat alone in the dim light of the living room, the reality of the situation began to sink in. What was meant to be a celebration was now shrouded in uncertainty, and the path forward seemed obscured by doubt and betrayal. Chapter 2, The Hidden Distance. 6 months ago, our plans for the wedding seemed flawless, and the meeting with both sets of parents was meant to solidify our future. The room was filled with laughter and excited chatter until Tina suddenly stepped outside to take a phone call. When she returned, her face was etched with worry, her demeanor shifted, and she seemed distracted. "I need to go out," she said abruptly, avoiding my gaze. Her tone was curt and impatient, as if she had already expended more energy on this than she was willing to spare. "It's work stuff. You wouldn't understand." Her words froze my expression. I could see the strain in her face, a stark contrast to the ease with which she had been interacting moments before. Tina noticed my reaction, hesitated, and then forced a smile. "Mark, could you please take care of both sets of parents?" Her tone was lighter but still carried a layer of detachment. Without waiting for my response, she turned and left, not once glancing back. Her sudden departure felt oddly familiar, but I couldn't quite place it. After seeing off our parents, I called Tina repeatedly, my frustration mounting with each unanswered call. Finally, someone answered. It was Rocky. "Sorry, man. I just arrived here. Lost my phone and don't have any cash on me." "I only remembered Tina's number," he said casually. His tone was so relaxed, it seemed almost too familiar. I gripped the phone tightly. "Where's Tina?" "She went to order food for me. She said if she couldn't find me, I should hold on to the phone," Rocky replied with a faint chuckle, clearly amused by the situation. "What's up, Mark? Do you need to talk to her?" His casual, almost intimate tone made my chest tighten. For a moment, it felt like Rocky was Tina's real partner, not me. My throat constricted, and I couldn't find the words to respond. When I arrived at the restaurant Rocky had mentioned, I saw them sitting together by a floor-to-ceiling window. Rocky was eating noodles with a casual ease, while Tina's phone rested on the table beside him. Tina was gently wiping soup stains from Rocky's mouth with a tissue, a gesture so intimate it struck me like a punch. The scene was eerily reminiscent of an early memory. Tina had once taken a phone call while in the bathroom. When she returned and found me holding her phone, she had snatched it away immediately. "Mark," she had said, "I have a strong sense of personal boundaries. I hope you can respect my privacy." That memory now felt distant, yet its weight was crushing. Rocky noticed me approaching and waved cheerfully. "Mark," he called out, his grin wide and unbothered. When I sat down, Rocky continued, "Sorry, man. I just heard Tina say you two were meeting with your parents today to talk about the wedding, and I ended up calling her out. My bad." I couldn't look at him. The silence stretched between us, heavy and uncomfortable. "Mark, are you mad at me?" Rocky asked, his tone almost playful. "How about this? I'll give you a big red envelope on your wedding day as compensation. Sound good?" Before I could respond, Tina interjected, her voice smooth and confident. "Mark won't be mad. He knows your situation is more urgent." She glanced at me, as if expecting my silent agreement. The pain in my chest was sharp, but I couldn't muster the strength to argue. After dropping Rocky off at his hotel, I returned home, the weight of the evening settling heavily on me. I turned to Tina, my voice low and strained. "Did you even consider how difficult it was for me to handle both sets of parents alone?" Tina was heading toward the study, her back to me. Without turning around, she replied, "Don't blame me for things that aren't my fault. You know very well who really made you uncomfortable." Her words cut deeply, knowing that she was referencing the tense dinner with my parents, their attempts to impress her family, and the constant push to find my brother a job. Tina's lack of acknowledgement felt like a betrayal. Seeing my pale face, Tina stopped and turned back, walking over to me. She wrapped her arms around me gently, her tone softening as she whispered, "I'm sorry, Mark. I didn't mean it that way." Her words were soothing, but they only deepened the ache inside me. "You know Rocky is my best friend. He's alone in this city, and if something happens, he has to rely on me." I clenched my jaw and took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "Tina, I've already told you about my family situation. You don't have to force yourself to help my brother find a job. My parents, they're just like that. Don't mind them. But if you don't feel the same about me, if you don't want to be with me, I'll leave. I won't bother you." Even with my eyes closed, I could feel the sadness overwhelming me, threatening to consume everything. Tina's voice was soft, trembling slightly. "Mark, I truly like you. And I do want to marry you." Her words hung in the air, and though they were meant to comfort, they did little to ease the storm of doubt and hurt churning inside me. The hidden distance between us had become glaringly apparent, and the future, once so clear and full of promise, now seemed clouded by uncertainty and pain. Chapter 3, The Past and Present Collide. Tina's expression softened as she spoke, though there was a hint of pain in her eyes. "Do you remember what I said before? In this world, I will never leave you." I bit my lip, struggling to contain the torrent of emotions threatening to break free. "What about Rocky?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. She hesitated, her gaze flickering. "We're just friends, Mark. If there's a problem, come to me. Don't blame him, okay?" It wasn't the first time Tina had defended Rocky, and by now, her unwavering loyalty to him was no longer surprising, but it still hurt. The memory of their closeness was always there, a shadow lurking over our relationship. The first time I met Rocky was during the summer break after Tina and I started dating. I had planned to stay at school, but Tina insisted I visit her hometown. We arrived the next day, just in time for one of her high school reunions. Our classmates have a great relationship. "We meet up every holiday," Tina said, her smile bright as she led me to a private room in a restaurant. As soon as she opened the door, a burst of confetti exploded, and someone wrapped their arms around her in a tight hug. "Son, come meet your dad," the voice called out, playful yet filled with familiarity. Tina wriggled free from the embrace, playfully slapping his arm. "Rocky," she exclaimed, before turning to me. "This is my boyfriend," she said, her tone affectionate but light, as if setting a boundary. Rocky's gaze shifted to me, lingering for a moment before he smiled and extended his hand. "Hello, I'm Rocky. Tina's deskmate for 3 years." His casual outfit and quiet arrogance didn't help the sense of unease that settled over me. Throughout the gathering, Rocky didn't miss an opportunity to showcase just how close he and Tina were. Their familiarity was palpable, and it gnawed at me. At one point, Rocky teased Tina about an old basketball injury, causing her to huff in mild annoyance. "Remember that time you hurt your leg during the basketball game?" I helped you get justice, Rocky chuckled. Stop it, princess. If it weren't for you, we wouldn't have even started that fight. Tina glared at him with her big, round eyes and pinched his arm playfully. How can you talk like that? I won't help you next time. All right. I was wrong. I definitely need you, Rocky replied, still laughing. Suddenly, Rocky seemed to remember my presence and raised his glass toward me. Sorry, Mark. We're close and used to joking around. Don't take it personally, he said with a grin. I nodded, trying to mask my discomfort. Rocky, older than me by more than half a year, called me by my nickname with an ease that felt like an intrusion. Before I could respond, one of their classmates laughed and added, Are you kidding? Back in high school, you were just one step away from being with Tina. If her boyfriend minded, would it even matter? I froze, a wave of insecurity crashing over me. Before I could say anything, Tina's expression darkened. She slammed her cup down on the table, her voice cold. Buddy, you're drunk. The tension that followed was palpable, but no one dared to speak further. The party carried on, but the discomfort between us lingered, souring the evening. Later, as I excused myself to use the restroom, I found the room mostly empty, with only a few stragglers left. In the far corner, Tina and Rocky sat close together, their heads bent as they spoke in hushed tones, unaware of my approach. I overheard Rocky say, We agreed that if neither of us had a partner by the time. I froze, my heart pounding. What agreement had they made? And why had Tina never mentioned it to me? The ease and intimacy between them felt like a betrayal. I stood there, feeling like an outsider in what I had believed was our relationship. The bond between Tina and Rocky, their connection that seemed to transcend mere friendship, cast a long shadow over everything. As I approached, Tina and Rocky's conversation stopped abruptly. Tina looked up, her eyes wide with surprise and something else I couldn't quite place. The comfort they shared was undeniable, and for the first time, I felt the weight of Rocky's presence in our lives, a presence that seemed to loom larger and more ominous than I had ever imagined. The past and present had collided, leaving me to grapple with the uncertain future of our relationship. Chapter 4, The Tipping Point. We agreed that if we turned 35 and were still single, we'd marry each other, Rocky had said, his tone lighthearted, but his words heavy with implication. Now that you have a boyfriend, I can finally relax, he added, looking into Tina's eyes with a mix of relief and something else I couldn't quite name. So you really don't mind at all? Tina asked quietly, her expression soft and searching. Rocky's confident smile didn't waver as he patted Tina's shoulder. Not at all. I hope you're happy. Later that night, as we drove away from the reunion, I couldn't hold back my growing insecurities. You two had a pact? I asked, struggling to keep the accusation out of my voice. Tina squeezed my hand, her voice soft, almost tender. We were young, Mark. Just close friends. It was a joke. But Rocky's words echoed in my mind, unshakable. He said you were just one step away from being together, I whispered, my voice trembling with the pain of it. Tina's mood shifted abruptly, her face hardening. He was drunk and talking nonsense. Are you drunk too? Her tone was harsh, startling me. I flinched, caught off guard by her sudden change in demeanor. I've known him for so long, she continued, her voice strained. If there was ever a chance, don't you think we would have been together by now? But we're not. I'm with you, Mark. Isn't that enough to prove how I feel? I swallowed hard, struggling to respond. I nodded slowly, pushing down the disappointment that had lodged itself in my chest. After Rocky left for his exchange program abroad, things between Tina and me seemed to stabilize. We both excelled in our careers, and discussions about marriage began to surface. But when Rocky returned, he slipped back into our lives with an ease that felt jarring. It was like a puzzle piece I didn't know was missing suddenly clicked into place. One day, while I was bedridden with a fever after an injury from playing basketball, Tina took care of me with tenderness. But just as I was about to fall asleep, Rocky called. My car broke down in the suburbs, and I can't get a ride. Come save me, he said, his voice casual as if he expected her to drop everything. I held a cup of hot water, about to say something, but Tina stood up decisively. You've taken your medicine, so just rest. I'll go help him, she said, her decision already made. Without hesitation, she left, just as she had done countless times before. As I lay in bed, I wondered if I was not enough to fill the void Rocky seemed to occupy in Tina's heart. Determined to prove my love and solidify our future, I planned a grand proposal for Tina's 25th birthday. I invited her closest friends, including Rocky, to witness the moment. My heart raced as I knelt before her, presenting the engagement ring. Tina, I love you. I truly, truly want to make you happy. Cheers erupted around us as people chanted, say yes. Say yes. I looked up at Tina, but her expression was hesitant. Her gaze briefly flickered to Rocky, who stood near the door. The moment stretched into eternity before she finally nodded and said yes. Her hesitation and glance at Rocky haunted me. Now, as I sat in the taxi on the night before our wedding, the memory of that day gnawed at me. My phone buzzed, interrupting my thoughts. I glanced down to see Tina's contact name flash on the screen, Little Rocky. I clenched my jaw and answered, trying to keep my voice steady. "Mark, did I leave my phone at home?" Tina's voice came through, calm but casual. "Yes, do you want me to bring it to you?" "No need. I'll pick it up when I get back," she replied before hanging up. The taxi pulled up to the bar, and I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what I might find. Following the seating number from her chat history, I walked inside. The dim lighting cast long shadows over the booths, and then I saw them. Rocky sat casually, drinking, while a beautiful woman leaned over, her hand grazing his face. Before I could react, Tina appeared, slapping the woman's hand away with force. "Don't touch him," she said sharply. The woman recoiled, stunned. "Who are you to meddle in this?" Tina, without missing a beat, replied, "I'm his girlfriend." Time seemed to freeze as those words hit me like a punch to the gut. I stood frozen, just a few steps away, as Tina defended Rocky in front of the stranger. She hadn't noticed me yet, but when she finally turned around, her face morphed from surprise to panic, then anger, before settling into an unsettling calm. "You're coming so late, and the wedding is tomorrow," Tina said coldly, her eyes dropping to my hand. Her gaze hardened. "Didn't I tell you not to mess with my phone?" I forced a smile, though it felt more like a grimace. "Yes, but I did anyway. If I hadn't, I wouldn't have seen you calling yourself his girlfriend in front of others." I pointed at Rocky, who was sitting behind her with that familiar, confident smile. "Sorry, Mark. Tina was just helping me out," he said casually. His nonchalant apology, his confident demeanor, it was as if nothing had changed. As if he always knew he would have a place in Tina's heart. I looked back at Tina, my voice trembling with a mix of pain and resignation. Is this what it's always been about? Helping him out, putting him first? Even on the night before our wedding? Tina remained silent, her silence more damning than any words she could have spoken. In that silence, I realized I had been fighting a battle I could never win. Chapter 5, The Breaking Point. The rational part of my mind snapped. Grabbing my phone, I opened Tina's Moments and scrolled to a post from 4 years ago. My hand trembled as I held it up to her. "If you and Rocky are so completely clean, then explain this." Tina's expression grew serious, her lips pressing into a tight line. Rocky, sitting nearby, looked like he was about to speak, but Tina cut him off, her gaze fixed on me. "Mark," she began, her voice steady but cold, "we're getting married tomorrow. What's the point of digging up something from 4 years ago? You're always dwelling on the past. No wonder you always say no one loves you." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. For a moment, the sadness overwhelmed me. Tina's eyes softened slightly when she saw my reaction. She stepped closer, her voice quieter. "Let's talk this through. Don't make a scene, okay?" Her classmates, gathering around with curiosity and judgment, made me feel like the villain. They were Rocky's friends, and with their 3 years of shared history, it wasn't surprising they quickly sided with him. One of them, a straightforward guy, stepped forward. "Mark, you're making a big deal out of nothing. If they were going to be together, they would have been by now. Why are you standing in the way?" Tina shot him a look and snapped, "Be quiet." But the damage had already been done. My palm tightened into a fist as I tried to calm myself, my voice trembling with barely controlled emotion. "Fine. If you two are so in love, then the wedding venue tomorrow is all yours." I placed my phone on the bar counter and turned to leave. Tina ran after me, wrapping her arms around me from behind. Her voice was muffled by the noise of the bar. "Mark, I didn't mean it like that." Her grip tightened around my waist, just like it had that day when I first fell for her during the club hiking trip. I had slipped down a steep slope, and she, despite her slight frame, held onto me until help arrived. She had dislocated her shoulder in the process but still comforted me, saying, "Anyone would have saved you." It was then I thought Tina was the one person who truly cared. Growing up, I had always been the second choice. When my brother and I fell into a river, my parents saved him first, leaving me to nearly drown. After that, I carried the belief that no one would ever choose me, until Tina. "Mark, you're the only person I see in my future," she pleaded, her voice shaking slightly. "Rocky and I were close before, but that's all in the past. When I think about my future, you're the only one in my plans. If I've said something wrong, scold me. But don't leave me." She took out her phone, opened the post I had shown her, and deleted it right in front of me. "If this bothers you, it's gone. And Rocky won't come to the wedding tomorrow. I'll make sure of it." Her tone was almost pleading, and despite everything, I felt myself softening. She had always been gentle and patient with me. So, once again, I caved. That night, sleep eluded me, but somehow I managed to convince myself that things would be okay. The next morning, everything went as planned. I was in my suit, styled and standing at the wedding venue. To my surprise, Rocky was nowhere to be seen among Tina's classmates, which eased my inexplicable anxiety. Maybe she really had meant what she said. As I stood there, my father, who hadn't spoken a kind word to me in over 20 years, approached me. He offered a stiff smile. "Tina's a good person. Your brother's job is thanks to her. You should listen to her." A chill ran down my spine. "What do you mean?" But he refused to elaborate, and the music swelled, signaling the start of the ceremony. We had planned to show a video compilation of our memories together, moments from the 6 years we had dated. I had barely managed to scrape together 2 minutes of footage from our quiet, unremarkable relationship, but I was proud of it. Proud of us. The lights dimmed, and the screen flickered to life. But what appeared wasn't the sweet, sentimental video I had prepared. Instead, the screen showed a dimly lit karaoke bar. Tina, visibly drunk, was sitting on Rocky's lap, leaning into him, her face inches from his. "Why can't you consider me?" she slurred, her voice soft and pleading. Rocky moved closer, pressing his lips to hers. "It's not the right time yet," he murmured. "I want to explore the world first." My chest tightened as the scene shifted. It was nighttime, and Tina was driving. Rocky, in the passenger seat, was snapping pictures of her. He laughed as he spoke. "You're coming to find me in the middle of the night. Won't Mark be mad?" Tina's voice echoed through the speakers. "Let him be mad. Nothing is more important than your safety." My mind raced, my stomach churning. The final clip played, footage from the bar just last night. Tina had slapped the woman's hand away from Rocky and declared, "I'm his girlfriend." I stood there, frozen, as the reality of everything crashed down on me. The room was filled with murmurs, but all I could hear was the pounding of my heart in my ears. Tina's betrayal was laid bare for everyone to see, and I had been the fool. The wedding venue, the decorations, the guests, all of it faded into the background as I turned to look at Tina. She was pale, her eyes wide with panic as she realized what had happened. But it was too late. The damage was done. And this time, I wasn't going to let her pull me back. Chapter 6, The Final Blow. Rocky raised his glass, his voice slurred but sharp. "Happy wedding." He gazed at Tina with a pained expression, his eyes glassy from alcohol. Tina, standing beside me, looked deeply into his eyes, as if searching for something. "What's there to be happy about?" she muttered, her voice low and laced with bitterness. "Don't you like Mark?" Her words cut deeper than any blade. It was as if my presence didn't matter, like I was just another face in the crowd. "Whether it's you or anyone else," she continued, "it's all the same. It's just making do." The video cut off abruptly, and the room fell into a suffocating silence. I felt like I was drowning. Her words echoed painfully in my chest. I suddenly remembered Rocky from the night before, his hand shaky with drunkenness as he shook mine. Not being able to attend the wedding. "It's okay, Mark," he had said with a sly grin. "I have prepared a wedding gift for you. You'll definitely like it." So this was his gift. The video was his final, brutal blow, a carefully timed, calculated destruction of everything I thought was real. A wave of immense pain washed over me, freezing my veins inch by inch. Each second after the video ended stretched into an eternity, my heart caught in a vice. "Mark," Tina finally managed, her voice barely a whisper. But before she could say more, the doors to the banquet hall burst open. Rocky, dressed in a sharp suit, stumbled inside, his face still flushed from the alcohol, holding a large bouquet of roses. His steps wavered slightly, but his voice was steady as he raised his hand to Tina, a ring glittering between his fingers. "Yesterday, you brought this ring from 7 years ago." His eyes locked onto hers, brimming with the weight of years of emotion. "I understand your intention, Tina. I've seen enough of the world. There's no need to wait until 35 anymore. Let me take you away. Come with me." The room erupted in gasps, but all I could hear was the pounding of my heart. Tina stood frozen beside me, her eyes locked on the ring in Rocky's hand. Her expression was a flood of memories, emotions warring on her face. After what felt like an eternity, she finally spoke, her voice trembling. "You said that freedom was more important than me." "I was wrong," Rocky replied, his voice thick with desperation. "I can't bear to see you marry someone else. I can't lose the chance between us." He looked at her with burning intensity. "Remember what you said? You said as long as I'm willing, the groom can be changed anytime. Is that promise still valid?" Tina's eyes instinctively flickered towards me, and for a moment, I saw a flash of guilt, of apology. "Mark," she began softly, "I will make it up to you." Her voice was low and quick, as if trying to salvage what was left of us. Rocky is proud, and with all these people here, I couldn't let him lose face. I promise, this will be the last time. But I had heard enough. The flame in my heart, the one that had been extinguished and reignited countless times over the years, finally flickered out. It was gone, leaving only cold, empty ashes. Tina turned back to Rocky, and before she could speak, I cut in, my voice cold and distant. Tina. My words were soft but carried a finality that made her freeze. The wedding won't happen. She turned towards me, her eyes wide with confusion. Mark, what are you? I don't need your compensation, I continued, my voice growing firmer. Just looking at you makes me want to vomit. Without waiting for her response, I turned and walked off the stage, each step carrying the weight of all the years I had wasted on her. Behind me, I heard her calling out my name, but I didn't look back. I kept moving toward the exit, toward freedom. Just as I reached the door, my parents blocked my way. My mother grabbed my wrist, her voice frantic. Mark, are you crazy? The relatives, the friends, they're all here. What is this about running away? I stared at her, my heart a cold stone in my chest. It's all like this, I said bitterly. Shouldn't I run? She was taken aback, her face a mixture of shock and disbelief. There must be a misunderstanding. Tina's a good person. Maybe you didn't do enough to keep her. I couldn't help it. I laughed, hard, bitter, and hollow. Mom, are you really my mother? My voice shook, but I didn't care. If you hate me this much, why did you even have me? She stared into my hollow eyes, momentarily speechless, until my father's harsh voice cut through. You will get married, whether you like it or not. No negotiations. Later, you go apologize to Tina, broaden your mind, and be more tolerant. A wave of nausea surged through me. I had to get out. If I stayed a moment longer, I would throw up. My mother's voice softened, trying to reason with me again. Mark, we've worked so hard to raise you. If you don't think about yourself, at least think about us. You're not young anymore. Without Tina, can you find someone better? Before I could respond, the door swung open again. Tina hurried out, looking relieved to see me still standing there. Mark, she said, breathless. Let me explain. Explain what? I cut her off, my voice trembling with barely contained anger. The wedding procedures, the video, everything, you checked it all. You confirmed it. So explain what exactly? For the first time, Tina had no response. She just stood there, looking at me as if all the words she had left to say had turned to dust. Chapter 7, Breaking Point. I was wrong, I spat, my voice shaking with years of pent-up frustration. I degraded myself chasing after you for 2 years. That was my mistake. But if you hate me so much, why hold this wedding? Why humiliate me in front of everyone? Tina stood frozen, her lips parting as if to respond, but nothing came out. I didn't, she started, but I cut her off. Don't lie. I yelled, my voice rising. The room around us seemed to vibrate with the intensity of my anger. Enough. My father's voice boomed. He turned to Tina with a smile, the kind reserved for someone far more valuable than his own son. Tina, let's go back in and greet the relatives and friends. He gave me a final, warning glare before ushering her towards the banquet hall. As they walked away, something clicked in my mind. The sudden shift in my parents' attitude towards Tina, from criticizing her for poor manners to treating her like royalty, it was too sharp, too sudden. A thought, unsettling and raw, began to form. Tina, I called out, my voice flat. Did you secretly arrange a job for my brother? Tina looked at me, her expression a mix of guilt and desperation. Yes, but Mark, that's because I truly wanted to marry you. I did it for us. She reached out, trying to grasp my hand, but I recoiled. Today was truly an accident, she continued, her voice soft, pleading. Rocky and I are impossible now. What I said earlier, it was just to protect his pride. I didn't want him to lose face in front of everyone. But I swear, I won't marry him. I only want you. Her words hung in the air, but all I could feel was a bitter, hollow laugh bubbling up inside me. The pieces were finally falling into place. My parents wanted to climb the social ladder. My brother needed a job. Rocky wanted to save face. And Tina wanted both of us, like we were just commodities to be bought and sold at her convenience. My parents bid. Tina paid. It was all so simple. I was nothing more than a pawn in their game. I don't want anything anymore, I muttered, shaking my head. Don't touch me. I stepped back, my voice rising in anger. You're disgusting, Tina. You're really disgusting. Her face fell, her gaze dimming with the weight of my words, but I couldn't care less. I gathered myself, forcing composure, and pushed the door open again, re-entering the hall. The first table was filled with Tina's classmates, their faces smug with pity as they watched Rocky, who sat in the center, basking in their sympathy. Don't be upset, Rocky, one of them said, patting his shoulder. Tina did say she liked you, didn't she? And this is a wedding, after all. Her parents and relatives are all here. Rocky's voice was stubborn, tinged with self-righteousness. Didn't she say she'd liked me for 10 years? I want her to prove, in front of everyone, that I'm more important than Mark. Otherwise, how can she show her feelings? Another friend chimed in, offering up a phone. How about it, Rocky? That video I edited for you is pretty good, right? Rocky glanced at the screen, smirking. It's good. I'll let my dad know. Their department is short on editors. Even now, Rocky remained the center of attention, still untouchable, still shamelessly taking pleasure in my suffering. I had enough. Without hesitation, I grabbed a wine glass from the table and smashed it over his head. The sound of shattering glass echoed through the hall as gasps erupted from the crowd. What are you doing? Rocky yelled, clutching his head in shock. Blood began to trickle down his forehead. Mark, are you insane? Tina's voice rang out as she rushed over, my parents trailing behind. Yes, I said, laughing bitterly. I am crazy. I've lived cautiously, careful and compromising, degrading myself for 25 years. Only now do I realize, going crazy is the only way to find relief. My father slapped me, hard, his face twisted in rage. He raised his hand to hit me again, but Tina stepped in, her eyes pleading. Uncle, please don't be angry, she said softly, holding his arm. I'll talk to Mark. She turned to me, her voice filled with a trace of pain, a trace of something real. Mark, don't be like this. I will compensate you. Rocky, still in shock, stood off to the side, wiping the blood from his forehead. Tina, he stammered, didn't you see him hit me? Tina closed her eyes, her chest rising and falling with the weight of the decision she had to make. When she opened them again, I saw something different. Her gaze was no longer filled with pity or guilt, it was filled with resolve. Chapter 8, The Final Break. Rocky's eyes smoldered with the weight of Tina's words, a mix of hurt and disbelief evident on his face. Tina's confession had struck a nerve, but I felt an emptiness inside me. My heart, once full of hope, had turned cold and indifferent. Each of her words was like an echo drifting through the void of my emotions. I did like you for a long time, Tina said softly, her gaze lingering on Rocky. Even when I saw you with that ring earlier, I thought you were proud. I didn't want to embarrass you. I've done everything I could for you. But now, I'm sure. I like Mark. You have many relatives and friends who love you, but he only has me. I can't leave him. I took a deep breath, my chest tightening as I tried to keep my composure. My voice came out steady, despite the storm raging inside me. Tina, my brother's job is not my concern. Handle it yourself. I won't be involved. A flicker of panic crossed Tina's face as she realized what was coming. Mark, I cut her off, my voice sharp and final. Tina, we're completely finished. Those words felt like they carried the weight of all the pain and betrayal I'd endured over the years. The wedding, which had already turned into a farce, was now a spectacle of public humiliation. Someone had recorded the chaos and posted it online. What began as outrage directed at Rocky quickly shifted. A particularly scathing comment went viral. Here's the inside scoop. The original groom is a gold-digging loser who relied on the bride's family to get ahead. The guy who crashed the wedding is actually a hero. And now the groom's family is still clinging to their jobs, refusing to quit. My phone number was soon posted alongside the comment, and I became the target of a storm of abuse. Messages and texts flooded in, each one tearing me apart further. Tracing the source of the comment led me straight to Rocky. I took a screenshot and sent it to Tina with a terse message. Before today ends, make him handle this, or I'll call the police. Tina's reply came almost instantly, a stark contrast to her usual reticence. Mark, where are you? Let's meet and talk. I ignored her message. I had spent 4 years waiting for this kind of urgency from her. Now that it was too late, she was suddenly desperate to reach me. I turned off my phone and headed to the nearest police station to file a report. The following day, I met Rocky at the police station. For over 20 years, his life had been smooth sailing, but this incident had shaken him. He was forced to issue a public apology under police instructions, and his friends had to delete their comments and post a public clarification video. By the time everything was sorted, night had fallen. As I stepped outside the station, I saw Tina waiting by the door. She looked haggard, her vibrant appearance diminished in just 2 weeks. Her once bright eyes were now dull, reflecting the strain she was under. When she saw me, she hurried over, her gaze locked onto mine with a desperate intensity. Mark, I finally see you, she said, her voice trembling. Rocky stood beside me, but Tina seemed oblivious to his presence. Her focus was solely on me, her eyes pleading for a response. You've been ignoring my calls, not responding to my messages. After you moved out that day, you didn't even go back to the company. I met her gaze, my feelings as cold as ice. Tina, I said that day was the last time. I will be entirely devoted to you from now on. Rocky, unable to contain his anger any longer, erupted. Do you think you're being fair to me? What's this now, Tina? You promised me you would wait for me forever. Tina turned to Rocky, her face cold and resolute. Rocky, you spread rumors about Mark online and exposed his phone number. We can't even be friends now. Friends? Rocky's laugh was harsh and bitter. Who wants to be friends with you? Tina, have you been acting for so long that you've fooled even yourself? Which friend gives another a ring, confesses over and over, and kisses them when drunk? Are you going to tell Mark what happened when you came to the UK last Christmas under the pretense of a business trip? Tina's face turned ashen, her lips trembling as she struggled to respond. Her eyes, filled with despair, sought mine, but I could only offer a bitter, hollow smile. You're not even embarrassed to bring up such dirty things, I said quietly, shaking my head. Birds of a feather flock together. After a prolonged silence, Tina spoke again, her voice barely a whisper. That was in the past, Mark. I didn't expect him to come to the wedding. I didn't know about the video. The best man was a high school friend of ours who has always had a good relationship with Rocky. He agreed to do this. Her voice cracked as she pleaded, just give me a chance. We'll start over. I'll give you the best of everything. Can we do that? Her vulnerability and desperation were palpable. If this had happened a year ago, I might have been swayed. Back then, I loved her deeply, craving the affection she seldom gave. I overlooked her obvious favoritism toward Rocky, convincing myself that as long as she loved me, it didn't matter if I wasn't her first choice. But now, that longing had withered. Grievances breed greater grievances, and compromise was no longer possible. Tina, I said, my voice devoid of emotion, I no longer like you. Just seeing you, or even thinking about living in the same city as you, makes me feel disgusted and nauseous. The fiasco that had been my wedding had drained me. I took a week off from work, my boss, Sarah, approving my leave request and even granting me an additional week. She wasn't a close friend. When we met at a cafe in the hotel lobby, Sarah's eyes were calm and steady. I saw what happened in the video, she said, her voice measured and even. Do you want to try something new? I was transferred to peaceful place. My mind became clear and I came back with peace. Few days went by. Chapter 9, The Final Confrontation. The humid air of Guangzhou enveloped me as I exited the office building, the oppressive heat a constant reminder of the city's relentless summer. It had been almost 3 months since I relocated here, and life had begun to settle into a monotonous rhythm of work and exhaustion that left little room for reflection. Yet, as I spotted Tina standing outside under the blistering sun, a torrent of suppressed emotions surged within me. Tina's figure appeared frail, a stark contrast to the vibrant woman she once was. I had heard snippets from university friends about her downfall. After the viral scandal, Tina's company had dismissed her for personal moral failure, and her career prospects had evaporated. Rocky's family, once thriving in the media industry, had also faced a significant decline. 10 years of affection and trust had crumbled under the weight of reality. I felt no sympathy. Mark, she called out, her voice struggling to rise above the din of passing traffic. I finally found you. I halted and turned to face her, my expression a carefully maintained mask of cold indifference. What do you want? A job referral? Her gaze lingered on me, soft and almost yearning. No. I've been trying to reach you for months. Your old number is disconnected, and even your parents said they couldn't contact you. And so what? I glanced at my watch, noting the time. You lost your job due to moral failure, Tina. But I still have to work. My tone was harsh and dismissive, a sharp edge to my words. I began to move towards the building again, but Tina's voice stopped me. You still care, don't you? She asked, her voice wavering slightly. Or are you just here to see the spectacle? I didn't respond. I walked into the building, leaving her behind. But as I stepped outside again at lunchtime with my colleagues, I saw her still waiting in the sweltering heat. The temperature had climbed to nearly 40 degrees Celsius, and the sun had been relentless. Her face was flushed, and her clothes clung to her skin, yet she made no move to leave. My colleagues noticed her too, casting curious glances in my direction, but none dared to ask questions. The tension was palpable, a silent inquiry hanging in the air. Once they left for lunch, I approached Tina, my frustration barely contained. Why are you still here? I demanded, my voice colder than I intended. I just wanted to talk, she replied, her voice barely a whisper. Please. I studied her, my heart conflicted. There was a time when I would have given anything to hear her say those words, to have her seek me out, to have her choose me. But now, after everything that had transpired, I felt nothing but emptiness. I don't owe you anything, Tina, I said finally, my voice devoid of warmth. Not after everything that's happened. Her eyes filled with desperation. I know I made mistakes, Mark. I know I hurt you. But I don't have anyone left. I didn't know it would end like this. I shook my head, a gesture of finality. That's not my problem anymore. You made your choices, and now you have to live with them, just like I had to live with mine. She took a step closer, reaching out as if to touch my arm, but I instinctively pulled back. Mark, I never wanted this. I never wanted to lose you. But you did, I replied sharply. And there's no going back. Her face fell, and for a fleeting moment, I felt a pang of pity. Almost. Goodbye, Tina, I said, turning away to leave. As I walked away, I realized that this was the closure I had longed for but never thought I'd achieve. The weight I had been carrying for years felt lighter. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. That evening, as I sat in my apartment, I reflected on Sarah's words from the day she offered me the position in New York. She had seen something in me, a potential I hadn't fully recognized in myself. One day you'll understand, she had said, that work and abilities will not betray you. The person who remains loyal to you the longest is yourself. Her words had resonated with me then, and now they felt more profound than ever. I had moved on, leaving behind the wreckage of a relationship that had defined me for far too long. The endless cycle of hope, disappointment, and compromise was finally over. Tina had been my world once, but that world was no longer mine. I picked up my phone and sent a message to Sarah. I've decided to take the position in New York. Thank you for the opportunity. I'll give it my all. The future was waiting for me, and for the first time, I felt ready to embrace it fully, unburdened by the shadow of my past. Chapter 10, The Final Goodbye. In the days that followed, Tina's persistence took on an eerie quality. She remained stationed outside my building, enduring both heat and rain as if her discomfort were inconsequential. Her lips, once full and vibrant, had cracked and her body trembled, but each time our eyes met, she forced a smile, clinging desperately to something that had long since vanished. The resentment I once harbored had faded into a cold void where emotions once lived. One night, I was working late on a critical project. It was nearly 1 a.m. when I finally left the office, the frigid wind cutting through the city and making me feel dizzy. I stumbled slightly but caught myself just in time. Before I could fully steady myself, Tina was there, rushing to my side with a look of panic. Mark, what happened? She asked, her voice quivering with concern. I took a few deep breaths, pulling away from her touch. I'm fine. Probably just low blood sugar, I said, my voice flat. I met her gaze with weary eyes. Tina, stop. This self-pitying act, it's not going to change anything. This belated affection makes me sick. Her face twisted with pain, but she remained silent. My life is good now, I continued, my voice harsh. My work is fulfilling, and I'm happy. If you really want to help, stop showing up in front of me. Tears welled in her eyes, but she looked at me with a sense of desperation. Even if I tried to make things right, you wouldn't forgive me? I let out a bitter laugh. The world doesn't revolve around your will, Tina. You think you can hurt someone, apologize, and everything will be fine? You made your choices, and I made mine. I don't owe you anything. She seemed stunned by my words, staring blankly as if unaccustomed to such coldness. The person who used to give in and tolerate her actions was gone. If you're here tomorrow, I'll call the police, I said, leaving her alone in the cold night. A year passed, and Tina gradually faded from my life. The branch office continued to thrive, and I was promoted to a leadership role. My income tripled, and the life I had built felt solid, grounded in the hard work I had invested. Sarah's words about loyalty to oneself echoed frequently in my mind, becoming a mantra I lived by. She had been right, self-love never betrays. One evening, after our department celebrated securing a massive contract, I stepped out onto the rooftop for some fresh air. The cool breeze helped clear my head after a few drinks. Just then, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Hello? I answered, but the line was silent. Hello? I repeated, about to hang up. Tina's voice, hoarse and broken, finally came through. Mark, how did you get my number? I asked, my tone sharp. She laughed softly, but it was a laugh that masked something darker. Someone who's about to die just wants to hear your voice one last time. I rolled my eyes. You're almost 30, Tina. Is this childish game really worth it? I'm not playing games, she said, her voice trembling. I'm really dying. 6 months ago, I was diagnosed with leukemia. I had a bone marrow transplant, but the rejection is getting worse. It's painful. I didn't want to tell you, but I just want to hear your voice before I die. There was a long pause as I processed her words. Despite everything, doubt lingered. Send me the hospital address, I said, my voice flat. When I walked into the hospital room, it was clear she wasn't lying. Tina looked like a ghost of her former self. She was thin and pale, her once vibrant presence now a distant memory. Her lips curled into a painful smile. "You look well, Mark. The world's been kind to you," she said softly. I sat beside her bed, unsure of what to say. "Has Rocky come to see you?" I asked, the question slipping out before I could stop it. She shook her head. "He's married now. It would be too awkward." We fell into silence, the weight of our shared past hanging heavy between us. My gaze drifted to the oranges on her bedside table, shriveled and forgotten, much like our relationship. After some brief small talk, I stood up to leave. "Don't think too much," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Just focus on getting better." Panic crossed her face as she sat up too quickly, wincing in pain. "You're leaving already?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I came here on business," I replied, glancing at the time. "I have a meeting at headquarters later." Her eyes dimmed, and she forced a bitter smile. "I see. I shouldn't have expected anything more." The sadness in her expression was palpable, rooted in regret and missed chances. But I had no sympathy left to give. "Goodbye, Tina," I said, turning to leave. As I walked down the hospital corridor, the smell of disinfectant lingered in the air, and the floor was freshly mopped, slippery beneath my feet. I slowed my pace, but I didn't stop. Behind me, Tina's muffled cries of pain pierced through the walls and echoed in my chest for a fleeting moment. I tightened my grip on my bag and kept walking, never looking back.